Hello, my name is Crystal Lister, and I am a technical program manager on the product security engineering threat intelligence team in Google Cloud CISO. Thank you for the opportunity to share our latest cloud threat intelligence research with you. But we're going to be talking today about ransomware and data theft running wild in the cloud, along with how cloud defenders can strengthen security to counter these types of attacks, right? So before we dive into the content, I have a question for you about something else that's wild. How fast can a cheetah travel? No cheating, no Googling for the answer. Just take a few seconds to make your best guess. You go ahead and put your answers in the Slack. Oh, we've got some interesting answers coming in. Okay, this is really cool. So the cheetah is the fastest land animal in the world because of its many physical characteristics that can help it reach speeds of up to, are you guys ready? See who won this one? 70 miles per hour, which is pretty wild when you think about it. Back to the topic for today, ransomware and extortion. Why are we talking about this? In a way, it kind of is running wild when you think about it. And I appreciate Marie sharing how long she's been in the field and the things that we see and the things that happen. But today we're going to take a very focused look at ransomware and data extortion and theft in the cloud. Currently, it is the preferred way that financially motivated threat actors are monetizing those intrusion operations in the cloud. And in 2023, we saw these types of attacks worldwide involving all leading cloud service providers. So far this year, the trend shows no signs of stopping. So just to be clear today about where our content's coming from, multiple sources today for our discussion, great? So Google Enterprise Threat Intelligence and Security Teams, our Threat Analysis Group, Mandiant Intelligence, Google Security Operations, Virus Total, and the cybersecurity industry. Our research in this area and some of the examples of threat activity I will share today includes data points specific to Google Cloud, as well as other cloud service provider agnostic information. So I want to be clear that we looked at this issue from a more functional perspective. So in general, across multiple industries, we intentionally chose not to limit the focus to one vertical, which was really interesting when you think about it, because the research is showing that these types of attacks span multiple industries for the cloud, including targeting cloud vendors and infrastructure, as we saw with the Akira ransomware attack on a Swedish cloud service provider. And currently the ongoing Black Basta has publicly been associated, right, with the ongoing ransomware attack on Ascension hospitals. During the presentation today, I just want to give you a quick roadmap for where we're going to go. I will share a little bit, as Marie mentioned, about my cybersecurity and threat intelligence journey, why I think this is such an interesting component of the cloud threat landscape after having worked in both the public and the private sectors. What are some of the common latest causes of ransomware and data theft in the cloud, right? We'll discuss those initial infection factors that threat actors are engaging in. I've got some pretty cool data to share with you today. How are threat actors conducting these types of attacks? We'll discuss some of the threat actor trends that we're keeping an eye on, including an attack model involving cloud storage. So what's next for ransomware and extortion in the cloud? We'll touch on how threat actors are adapting their tools. We'll also explore some actionable risk mitigations for Google Cloud, as well as cloud service provider agnostic ideas there. So we'll close our time today with a few hot off the press items that I wanted to make sure and share with you for additional resources. So a little bit about my cybersecurity journey. But first, if you remember nothing else from this slide, I have two amazing Douglers. They're not on screen right now, but let's hope they don't choose to make a cameo. So I have a female German Shepherd and a male American Alsatian. So definitely got to give the love to my Douglers, right? My team here at Google Cloud provides cloud threat intelligence to help inform Google Cloud product security engineering efforts. And at the same time, we also help inform Google Cloud customers to help improve their cloud defenses and maintain resilient business operations, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. That's why we're here. I also lead the editorial process for the Google Cloud Threat Horizons report, which provides our customers with some of the latest cloud threat landscape trends and threat-informed risk mitigations from our company's unique perspective. I have a background, as Marie mentioned, in computer science and finance. So that was really helpful for me on my journey. Starting out as an all-source cyber threat intelligence at the CIA for over a decade, I looked at non-state actors such as terrorist use of the internet and cyber criminals. But what are our state actors doing as well? What are our really well-resourced adversaries doing? So I did that for a time as well. Also led cross-functional engineering efforts to protect fast-paced business operations worldwide from insider threats. And after public service, I co-founded a cybersecurity service startups in the private sector, where I provided cybersecurity consulting for customers in multiple verticals. So space, energy, healthcare. And that was just really interesting to see how each, not just vertical, but customer individually would approach cybersecurity. So my LinkedIn and my X handle are on the slide. And my book on insider threat risk management is out later this summer. So definitely look more forward to talking to you more about that as well. But from a cloud storage asset perspective, let's take a moment. Now it's time for your participation. There's going to be a lot coming from me. I've got a lot of content to share, but I want to take a moment. Please put a thumbs up in the Slack chat space if you work in a cloud security role. I'm going to give you guys just a chance to do that. Fantastic. Okay, so if you work in a cloud security role in any capacity today, keeping in mind that even if you don't, there's a pretty good chance or a strong possibility that your security journey may intersect with cloud at some point in the future. Or maybe it's something that you want to get into, but you haven't had a chance yet. Why would you care about working about cloud threats in this area? Well, one industry report recently analyzed showed that 13 billion files stored in public cloud environments discovered that more than 30% of cloud data assets contain sensitive information. This likely contributes to making cloud storage assets higher priority targets for threat actors, right? And then when we think about 82% of data breaches reviewed by IBM's recent data breach action guide in 2023 involve data stored in the cloud, whether public or private or in multiple cloud environments, really indicating that cloud is a frequent target of threat actors. And then there's 75% of nearly 3,000 respondents in a recent cloud security study by Thales reported that 40% or more of their data in the cloud is sensitive. So with more data residing in the cloud, it becomes an increasingly attractive target for threat actors to monetize their intrusions. And even among Google Cloud customers, we've observed credential issues remain the predominant security oversight by customers. So I've got some interesting information to share on the next slide about that. But before we take a deeper dive on how threat actors are gaining access to cloud service provider agnostic environments to conduct those ransomware and data extortion attacks, let's take a step back a moment and take a look at what this looks like in Google Cloud specifically. One area that our security teams look into here at Google is evaluating how we see threat actors gaining that initial access into Google Cloud customer projects at times. Our data shows that the initial access vector in 2023 for threat actors to gain unauthorized access to Google Cloud environments were credential issues, so such as weak or non-existent passwords. This factored into over half of incidents in most quarters last year. Then we have to think about, well, what was the second? The second top compromised factor was misconfiguration issues. So those unrestricted port issues, user privileges that are excessive. This accounted for more than 17% of all compromises for the year. So why do these top two initial access vectors, why are they happening? What do they tell us? What can we glean from this intelligence? Credential and misconfiguration issues represent a persistent data breach risk due to poor cloud security hygiene. So these types of insights, these types of data types, they help us identify not only how threat actors are accessing cloud environments, but they help us identify opportunities that we can implement to help prevent this type of threat activity, including benefits that are inherent in Google Cloud as well as other providers, and a few risk mitigations that customers can proactively engage in on their own. So we'll get more into that in just a moment. Now let's broaden our focus from Google Cloud specific initial access vectors to how threat actors are more indiscriminately accessing a range of cloud environments for ransomware and data theft campaigns. It's interesting to note that our research indicates that the initial access vectors were similar with regard to weak credentials. So that think about that default or lack of passwords for cloud apps and systems, or misconfigurations. So one example we saw of this last year was when threat actors conducted a ransomware attack resulting in lost customer data on cloud hosting firms, Cloud Nordic and Azero Cloud, when the firm's servers were misconfigured during a data center migration, right? So 3 other areas that we've seen threat actors consistently targeting were weak cloud storage defenses, also threat actors targeting application vulnerabilities, so your 0 days, we're going to get more into that in just a moment, and third-party risk issues like software supply chain risk, obviously very important. Now, going back a moment, one example that I wanted to share was when we think about how are those threat actors targeting weak cloud storage defenses. We did see a case with suspected receipt of ransomware allegedly breaching Slovenia's largest power provider. I mean, energy, this is obviously something very important we want to keep an eye on, by stealing passwords for systems from an unprotected cloud storage instance. So something for our cloud security defenders to make sure they're thinking about. We're seeing an increase in ransomware and data theft from a cloud service provider agnostic perspective from a variety of initial access vectors, but primarily these credential issues and these misconfiguration issues seem to be lingering. How many of you have seen a Cheetah running in the clouds before? Right? Interesting. Threat actors have evolved their methods for conducting ransomware attacks in the cloud and on-premise during 2023. And so far this year show no signs of stopping. We'll talk about a few threat actor tactics that we're currently following that highlight the severity of this growing threat. So we're seeing things that we haven't seen before, right? We're seeing some things that we've seen, that have just caught our attention. We want to keep an eye on, in addition to all of the other interesting topics that are coming out today at the summit. But one thing that we're seeing is rather than focusing strictly on weak cloud credentials to gain that initial access, some online extortion groups shifted from using client-side to server-side exploits and incidents in multiple cloud providers last year. So one group that we're following in particular is CLOP, or also known as Fin11 ransomware group, who exploited at least 3 server-side 0 days last year. We'll cover more of that on the next slide. We're also seeing some ransomware groups exploiting in-day vulnerabilities to move and deliver malware to host victim organizations. One example of that is that in April 2023, CLOP actors and associated initial access brokers exploited a now patched 0 day in print management software Papercut to drop malware. So after Papercut released a patch, other groups, including bloody ransomware actors, exploited the bug as an in-day, prompting groups like USDHS, CISA, and FBI to issue a joint advisory on their exploitation of that vulnerability. In addition, we've also seen in April 2023, Alfie and Black Cat ransomware as a service affiliates compromised victims in cases where access was obtained by exploiting an in-day in the Go Anywhere MFT for initial access. One other thing that we want to point out when we think about what threat actors are doing in the cloud is stolen data advertisements grew in 2023 as threat actors demonstrated that increased focus on publicly releasing exfiltrated data from multiple cloud providers. This really suggests to us that threat actors are increasingly seeking to profit by selling the data or the access to the data, rather than expecting victims to pay a ransom for decryption keys to decrypt the data, right? So a couple of examples of that stood out to us. One was involving Lockbit ransomware actors who posted Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company information on their leak site back in July of 2023. They posted that with a $70 million extortion demand. threatening to either destroy the data or make it publicly downloadable. We've also seen this with muddled Libra or scattered spider or UNC3944, and there's other names that this one's followed by. They've been observed actively targeting software as a service applications and CSP environments to exfiltrate sensitive data. Now, this is an issue that Google Cloud Threat Horizons report flagged last year in 2023, when our team observed persistent threat actor activity targeting data stored on cloud-hosted SaaS systems across multiple industries, at times with new attack methods. Now, from an abuse perspective, obviously threat actors have been exfiltrating stolen data from sending stolen data to public cloud storage platforms when conducting ransomware attacks. We've seen this with Black Basta threat actors, according to press reporting at least, using Darkgate ransomware as a service associated with data exfiltration and extortion, utilizing cloud storage. And also with PlayCrypt actors in June 2023 who leveraged stolen credentials to gain access to a victim's network. Now, I said that we were going to spend a little bit more time on CLOP and their zero-day activity, so let's do that now. You know, as I mentioned on the last slide, one of those financially motivated groups that we've been following who shifted from client-side to server-side exploitation to really continue monetizing their efforts was CLOP, or also known as Fin11. They exploited at least 3 server-side 0 days in 2023. We know that in June 2023, for example, Mandiant observed CLOP actors engage in widespread exploitation of a now patched 0 day in the MoveIt Transfer Secure managed file transfer software. And then they claimed responsibility for the attack on their leak site. And according to press, the attack claimed over 2,000 victim organizations. But one of the new and concerning things that we saw with this group in particular's threat activity is that they actually had asked victims to reach out to them, vice them reaching out directly to their victims. Kind of odd, right? Likely indicative of the volume of victims and stolen data involved in that particular compromise. But prior to that one, we also saw CLOP actors exploit Fortress Go Anywhere managed file transfer software. That started back in January 2023. They stole data from at least 130 victim organizations before Fortress patched that flaw in February. And then finally, the other one was CLOP actors exploiting in November 2023 and now patched 0 day in the IT management software Sysaid. So from a 0 day perspective, I wanted to make sure and point out a few examples of what my company in particular is doing to help with these issues, maybe a resource for some of you, and an update. Mandiant Intelligence does track threat actor activity with 0 days closely. And according to the latest intelligence and our threat analysis group's first ever 0 day year in review, which came out in March of 2024, you can see in the upper right-hand corner of the bar chart that we at Google observed 97 0 days exploited in the wild in 2023. So that's over 50% more than in 2022, when there were actually 62. But less than the record was actually 106 in 2021. Also, Google security teams do actively track 0 days developed by spyware vendors and work with the industry and government partners to help raise the profile of how damaging exploitations created by commercial spyware vendors can be. So I definitely have resources on that if useful. Ping me offline. But right now, let's take a look at a diagram which models how a cloud storage bucket naming convention could be exploited by a threat actor. This model is based on direct observations by the Google Cloud Storage team of threat actors probing weak cloud storage bucket naming conventions to exfiltrate data. So if done right, this allows the threat actors to pre-create buckets in which data is subsequently stored by users, which the threat actors can then immediately exfiltrate after data is stored there. So on the left-hand side, you can see if, for example, corporate engineers creating buckets for using app and begins storing data in them, then an attacker can anticipate the next two bucket names and creates buckets with those names using app. And so we're assuming that it has some sort of auto discovery feature for new buckets, making them viable options for users to store their data in, right? The app needs to use buckets and identifies the two illegitimate buckets, in this case, created by the attacker, and begins storing data in them. So finally, the attackers use that owner access that they have to the system they created to access and exfiltrate the data that app put into them. So one control we recommend to prevent this type of attack is domain named buckets, which require verification. Even if the bucket name is easy to guess, an attacker cannot simply create a google.com bucket and enumerate from there. Another mitigation for this particular scenario is checking ownership of the bucket, and if possible, checking correct project association. So also in the case of third-party apps that require access to your buckets, if you own the app or the app supports it, you can create conditions to confirm a particular naming convention and owner simultaneously. So moving on. How many of you have ever seen a cheetah and a sloth next to each other before? Just curious. Maybe people have dreamed about this, could be in a children's book, who knows? But we are seeing a number of threat actors adapt their tools for conducting ransomware attacks and stealing data in the cloud. Why the cheetah? Why the sloth? Okay, so obviously the cheetah is one of the fastest land animals, but we have to think about how can we not be a sloth about this? We've got folks like Mandiant Intelligence identifying more than 100 tools from backdoors, downloaders, and ransomware that are either targeted or have the capability to leverage cloud-related technologies for C2, for payload hosting, data exfil. And something else to keep an eye on of interest the last few years by ransomware developers is in creating Linux variants and ransomware builds specific to VMware ESXi. This is very popular, not easy to patch, and attackers appear to be taking advantage of this. Unfortunately, some organizations leave their hypervisors open and exposed to the internet. But what do things like this mean? What does the interest in the adaptation by threat actors to continue evolving their tools to conduct ransomware and data theft in the cloud mean? The threat to cloud-based data, assets, and resources continues to grow, right? As threat actors seek novel ways to bypass security measures, breach cloud environments, and move laterally to access that sensitive data. So what we want to think about now is how to not be a sloth about preventing ransomware and data theft in the cloud. But tying back to our thoughts from our poll earlier today, whether you work in cloud security, if you have, I mean, unfortunately, have you dealt with ransomware or data theft incident in the cloud? Personally, I think that sloths are pretty cute, but here's your chance not to be one about cloud security if you find yourself in this situation. I'm going to share a couple of risk mitigations, some of the top mitigations that you can take back with you to your team or to your customers, if you're external facing, to help prevent them from becoming a news headline for being a victim of ransomware or extortion in the cloud. And some of these you may have seen before, but as we saw with some of our top initial access factors into cloud right now being misconfiguration and credential issues, it's worth kind of putting a foot stomp on. But one of the areas that I wanted to bring up first is actually one of the areas that I see many times brought up in cybersecurity last. It's very interesting when we think about employee awareness. There are a lot of surveys and reports out there about the human element and the human side of security. But one thing I will share is I did see an interesting statistic or stat come out of Gartner where they are saying that through 2025, that it's possible up to 99% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault or some level of human error in a way. So this makes us think back to, okay, weakest link. We're only as strong as our weakest link, right? What can we do about this? How can we make our help make our workforce more defend and protect naturally instead of being part of that weakest link in a chain, right? Because sometimes, despite inherent cloud security measures, security lapses still stem from how users interact with the system. So that's why we bring that up first here. But obviously, training scenarios, for example, your responders in your organization, whether it's phishing simulation for your users, how they behave, how they train is how they're going to act in that moment whenever an incident could potentially be occurring or could be or your organization's being targeted. But moving on to cloud asset inventory as well, with the time that we have. As you are aware, your organization or customers may have millions of resources and policies, which introduces a lot of challenges, including how can you keep an eye on those changes? How do you know how many virtual machines are in your organization? How do you keep track of that? Here at Google, we recommend customers use our Google Cloud Asset Inventory services to view and monitor real-time configurations, which also works at the organization, project, and folder level. But also, in addition to this, for better visibility and control from a cloud service provider agnostic perspective, some best practices for asset inventory in the cloud also include automated discovery and tracking. So whether that's using native tools, like I mentioned with GCP or AWS config or Azure resources graph that will automatically help with that, or integrating with third-party tools for more visibility. You could also think about identifying and classifying sensitive data in the cloud so that then you know how it best needs to be protected, whether there are any regulation angles there as well. But also for Google Cloud, we recommend robust cloud identity and access management to help protect cloud assets and resources, to make sure that only the right users have the right access to specific resources at the right time. So a couple of other cloud service provider agnostic best practices include the principle of least privilege, right, to help avoid those overly broad permissions when possible, regularly auditing to review and revoke those unnecessary permissions. I know when we go into press reporting, and often we see there's instances where offboarding procedures could have more policy applied to this, that whenever you see a lot of times organizations are not as careful when employees are being offboarded, and sometimes things slip through the cracks and people still have access to things that they shouldn't. And obviously this can be helped from a risk perspective as well by monitoring and auditing identity and access management by doing things such as reviewing privileged user credentials and cleaning up those unused accounts. But from a secure configuration and patching perspective, thinking about hardening cloud services apps with firewalls, right, to control the traffic flow, but also regularly scanning your cloud environments for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and applying those patches and updates regularly. Again, just a few more that we want to call out with the time that we have today and really this is all of these I should have said are through the lens from thinking about how to best prevent and mitigate risk from ransomware or data theft or extortion in the cloud. Data storage security, obviously, right? So using technologies such as Worm or in the case of Google Cloud, bucket lock feature to provide immutable and policy compliant backup storage. So this can help with prevent deletion or modification of content for a set period of time, but also from a cloud service provider agnostic perspective for data loss, thinking about data loss prevention technologies and policies to prevent accidental or intentional data leaks, unauthorized data sharing, and other risks there. But a couple of frameworks that we want to call out would be the Cloud Security Alliance Cloud Controls Matrix that can also help with cloud asset inventory. They have a very comprehensive set of security controls that are organized into domains covering all aspects of cloud security, not to mention NIST's cybersecurity framework, which is adaptable for various industries, and it can be applied to cloud environments as well. Then there's the Center for Internet Security, which also provides configuration guidance for various cloud services and more. So from a couple of tools that we want to make sure and call out are cloud security posture management to automate that continuous monitoring, cloud workload protection platforms for securing workloads running in your cloud environment, and cloud infrastructure entitlement management to help you manage and really govern access to your cloud resources. So also we wanted to share resilient architecture as another one that comes to mind when we think about this particular threat. Implementing resilient architecture such as multi-region cloud use and backup mirroring to reduce the risk of data loss. Having a very cloud-specific backup strategy in place that includes configurations and templates of stored assets. So not just solely backups of data or machine state, but it's also important to encrypt all the backups and use customer managed encryption keys when possible and segregate that key access to help prevent attackers from getting a hold of them and being able to read the backups. So one other that we want to share with you on this one in the time that we have is thinking about using the SEM solution to collect and analyze logs from all cloud resources. There's been an emphasis in the community recently on the importance and criticality of logging. There's a pretty cool article in a recent Google Cloud Threat Horizons report that goes into details on that as well, and how and why it's important to cloud security, but also endpoint detection and response solutions. So EDR and your workloads to detect and respond can help you respond to ransomware attacks in real time. And then if making sure you have that business continuity and disaster recovery plan. So here at Google, I know we recommend that there is testing for cloud-specific backup strategy at least twice annually. But I did mention that we had some hot off the press additional resources to share. And I'll just flag these for you briefly. But there is the Ransomware Protection and Containment Strategy Guide that came out from Mandiant Intelligence in April of 2024. It gets into some really interesting insights on how threat actors are weaponizing trusted service infrastructure and targeting platforms. Then I mentioned the Google Cloud Threat Horizons report. The next iteration will be out here later after July this summer. And then also the federal government says it's got a really cool ransomware vulnerability warning pilot, which is an incredible resource to help, which CISA leverages their existing authorities to proactively identify information systems that contain vulnerabilities associated with ransomware attacks. So with that, I know we did a lot. I appreciate your time today, and I want to challenge you to take at least one risk mitigation idea or resource back to your team to share with your cloud security network, and have an incredible time at the rest of the summit. And I am open for questions.